10 friends, one basketball game, and a disappearance so baffling it would haunt an entire town for decades. They were young, full of life, and bonded by the sport they loved. Best friends since grade school, most of them had been on the court together since they could dribble a ball. They shared sleepovers, birthdays, holidays. Their parents knew each other. Their teachers watched them grow up. They were the pride of Millfield, the town's golden generation. That night was supposed to be nothing special. Just a casual game, a road trip, and plans to hit the diner after. Another chapter in their normal, joyful lives. But by sunrise, they had become the center of a nightmare no one could wake up from. The game ended. They got back into their beat-up van, laughing, buzzing with energy, talking about plays, teasing each other, already planning the next practice. And then, silence. No crash, no calls, no signs of struggle, just gone. 3 days later, a park ranger stumbled across the van, abandoned deep in the snow-covered Black Pine National Forest, far off any main road. The engine was still warm. Half-drunk sodas sat in the cup holders. Bags were still in the back. One door was hanging open, but not a single footprint in the snow. Inside the van, the air smelled faintly of fast food and sweat like they had just left. A basketball rested beneath one of the seats. A mixtape labeled Road Vibes sat jammed in the cassette player. There was no blood, no shattered glass, no struggle, just absence. Like they'd vanished mid-conversation, like time had paused for everyone but them. What began as a search turned into an obsession. For 17 weeks, their families begged for answers. Hundreds of volunteers combed the forest. Helicopters scanned miles of rugged terrain. Psychics weighed in. Theories spiraled out of control. News stations picked it up. Talk shows speculated. Local newspapers printed maps and timelines. Still, nothing made sense. And then, just when hope had begun to fade, something was found. But it wasn't the ending anyone had prayed for. What was discovered 17 weeks later, hundreds of miles from where they vanished, wouldn't solve the mystery. It would make it even worse, colder, and darker. This isn't a story about getting lost. This is a story about something no one can explain. A story about 10 friends who went into the night and never came back. And about a discovery so chilling, it would leave more questions than answers. Stay with us, because what happened to the Millfield Meteors might change how you think about the line between reason and the unknown. In the small, tightly knit town of Millfield, Oregon, life moved at a slower, more deliberate pace, where time was measured less by clocks and more by traditions, routines, and the changing of the seasons. Tucked between tall pines and winding back roads, Millfield wasn't on many maps, but it didn't need to be. It was a place where stories were passed down over backyard fences, and children grew up under the watchful eyes of neighbors who felt more like extended family. Everyone knew everyone else. You couldn't walk down Main Street without stopping for at least 3 conversations and a cup of coffee you didn't ask for but couldn't turn down. Local businesses weren't just storefronts. They were institutions. Barb at the bakery knew every kid's birthday. The gas station had a corkboard covered in hand-drawn thank you notes and lost dog flyers. And every Friday night, like clockwork, the town came alive to the rhythmic beat of bouncing basketballs and the squeak of sneakers on the polished hardwood floor of the high school gym. The gym wasn't just a building. It was Millfield's cathedral. It held generations of memories, first dates in the bleachers, last-minute buzzer beaters, the echo of a town's collective hope and heartbreak. The Millfield Meteors weren't professionals. They didn't have sponsorships or press coverage. But to Millfield, they were stars, heroes. Their games weren't just events, they were rituals. People wore their colors to work. Restaurants adjusted hours around tip-off. Elementary school kids traded crumpled trading cards of their favorite players, homemade with Sharpies and printer paper. The team represented more than skill. They embodied heart, effort, and unity. Their strength wasn't just in talent, but in their connection, built through years of shared rides, bruises, laughter, and loyalty. Marcus Reynolds, the captain, was the soul of the team, not just a leader in title, but in spirit. He had a way of making every player feel seen. whether it was a starter or someone who barely touched the court. He was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, often mopping the gym floor or helping a teammate work through a slump. He dreamed of coaching, not because he loved the glory, but because he loved the game and the people it brought together. Ezra Klein was his quiet counterpart, the thinker, the analyst. Where Marcus led with heart, Ezra led with precision. He carried a worn spiral notebook everywhere, filled with diagrams, stats, motivational quotes, and notes from old games. He was obsessed with understanding basketball's inner workings, like a scientist studying movement and strategy. His dream was to study kinesiology, to heal bodies, and improve performance. But on the court, he was all intensity, a calm storm who didn't need to shout to be heard. Then there was Darnell Green, the emotional engine, loud, animated, always with a story. His laugh could crack through the tension of any locker room moment. He was the player who danced during warm-ups and cracked jokes during film sessions. Yet beneath the humor was someone deeply loyal, someone who showed up to every birthday party, who helped teammates move furniture, who made the team feel like family. Growing up in a crowded household, Darnell often said his teammates were his chosen brothers. Cody and James Tucker, the twins, were near mythical in how seamlessly they moved together. On the court, they communicated through nods, glances, and instinct. Off the court, they finished each other's thoughts, switched places for laughs, and had the same goal to one day run a sports podcast from their basement, complete with janky microphones and questionable hot takes. Teachers both loved and dreaded them, depending on the day. Trevor Martinez didn't play many minutes, but you wouldn't know it from his commitment. He was everywhere, handing out water, managing gear, filming games, organizing rides. He was the team's logistics guru, unofficial morale officer, and the kind of guy who remembered birthdays and made personalized playlists for road trips. Being part of the Meteors gave Trevor a sense of purpose, and he returned that by making sure no detail ever slipped through the cracks. Adrian Lee brought the fire, the kind of player who wore his emotions like a badge, fiercely competitive, quick-tempered, but also fiercely loyal. He'd defend a teammate in a heartbeat, even if it meant getting benched. Luis Navarro balanced him out, soft-spoken, thoughtful, and generous. Luis often stayed late to tutor teammates and volunteered as a translator at parent-teacher meetings for Spanish-speaking families. His quiet leadership made him a bridge between generations. Theo Mason lived in the gym, always practicing, always pushing, always chasing the next level. He was the one with motivational quotes taped to his locker and recruiting letters folded neatly in his backpack. He was being scouted by a junior college, but he never let that change him. He still rode his bike to practice and helped younger players tie their shoes. Brian Chen, meanwhile, was the guardian. Reserved, perceptive, and calm. He diffused locker room arguments, noticed when someone was struggling, and quietly offered help. He was the emotional barometer of the team, the one who noticed what others missed. Together, these 10 young men weren't just a team. They were a brotherhood. They shared rides, inside jokes, secret handshakes, and the kind of unspoken support that only years of deep friendship can forge. Weekends were spent at the local arcade, where they held high scores on every machine, or at someone's house eating pizza and reviewing game footage. They helped each other study, covered each other's shifts at work, and showed up at family barbecues uninvited but always welcome. Basketball wasn't just a sport to them, it was identity, purpose, and sanctuary. For some, it was a dream. For others, an anchor. But for all, it was home. February 19, 2004, was just another page in their shared calendar. A routine Thursday, a road game against the Ashgrove Titans, a scrappy, aggressive rival. Not a playoff match, not a spotlight event, just another chance to play, another night to ride the rhythm they knew so well. They packed into Adrian's battered blue van, patched with duct tape, its stereo long dead, replaced by a cassette adapter and someone's iPod filled with mixtapes and early 2000s R&B. The van groaned and rattled, but it moved, and with the team inside, it might as well have been a limo. They teased each other. argued over NBA stats, and made bets about the game. Some wore headphones. Others texted girlfriends on their flip phones. Every mile passed with laughter and music and the warmth of familiarity. They reached Ash Grove by 7:00 p.m. The opposing gym was packed, buzzing with small-town tension and pride. The game was tight, physical, full of heart. They fought hard. They lost just barely, but there was no shame, no sulking. They shook hands, exchanged jokes with summer league rivals, and made plans to meet again in the playoffs. A few lingered behind grabbing Gatorades, talking to friends, checking the vending machines for snacks. By 10:00 p.m., they were back together. One last laugh, one last cheer. They piled into the van, tired but content. A few students waved from the sidewalk. The van pulled out of the parking lot, its taillights fading into the night, swallowed by the dark road leading out of Ash Grove. That was the last confirmed sighting of the Millfield Meteors. By the next morning, alarm bells were ringing quietly at first, like the distant tremors before a quake. Just a handful of unread messages, a few unanswered calls that went straight to voicemail. Little things, the kinds of delays parents chalk up to post-game hangouts or teens being forgetful. No one panicked. Not yet. Marcus's mom, Dina, figured the boys had crashed at someone's house after grabbing food, maybe celebrating or just blowing off steam. Trevor's dad assumed they'd pulled over somewhere, waiting out the weather, maybe swapping stories over gas station snacks. The roads hadn't been great the night before, and teens were known to improvise plans. That's what kids did, right? But the silence didn't lift. By mid-morning, the unease became harder to ignore. Ezra hadn't texted back. Cody and James never came home. Marcus's phone still rang twice, then cut straight to voicemail. Darnell hadn't posted anything online, which was, for him, unheard of. A few parents exchanged casual check-ins. Were your boys home yet? Did they maybe stop somewhere on the way back? By noon, the concern shifted from casual to urgent. Not one of the 10 boys had made contact. 10 teenagers, 10 phones, 10 families completely cut off. A group text was created by someone's mom. Messages flooded in, raw and frantic. Has anyone heard from Luis? Still nothing from Theo or Brian. We tried Ezra's GPS noping. We just drove the highway Ruteno sign of the van. Hospital? Police? Where the hell are they? Some parents clung to logic, to optimism. Maybe the van broke down in a dead zone. Maybe their phones had died. But those explanations thinned as minutes ticked into hours. The snowstorm had passed, but no one had returned. No lights in driveways. No slamming of car doors. Just empty beds and growing dread. Claire Klein, Ezra's mother, couldn't sit still. Her hands trembled as she filled a thermos with coffee, grabbed her snow boots, and set off in her car. She retraced the route from Millfield to Ash Grove mile by mile, eyes scanning every roadside ditch, every stretch of wooded shoulder. She stopped at gas stations, cafes, even small-town libraries, showing people pictures of the boys. No one had seen anything. The roads were quiet. The landscape, silent and snow-covered, gave nothing away. She drove the route again the next morning, and again that afternoon. Still nothing. By Saturday morning, fear had taken root across the entire town. What began as isolated family worry had become something much bigger, a collective panic, wrapped in frozen breath and whispered prayers. Flyers were made on home printers, rushed out with trembling hands. They were taped to every storefront, street lamp, and bulletin board from Millfield to the outer towns. The headline was stark. Missing 10, young men last seen Thursday night. Word spread like wildfire. Local radio stations interrupted programming. The town paper printed a special bulletin. Facebook exploded with shared posts and photos. The Millfield Meteors weren't just any boys. They were the boys. Everyone knew them. Everyone had a connection, a cousin, a neighbor, a friend. And now they are gone. Teachers skipped classes to join search parties. Coaches set up a makeshift headquarters in the school gym. Students organized rides. The town's diner offered free meals and bottomless coffee to anyone out looking. Firefighters joined in, local hunters combed the backwoods, retired veterans volunteered their time. People brought sleds, snowmobiles, even horses to cover terrain no vehicle could reach. It didn't matter if you knew the boys personally. This was Millfield. You showed up. Then came the storm's return. A second wave of snow swept in worse than before. A deep freeze settled over the region. Thick sheets of white smothered the hills, the roads, the forests. Wind howled down through the pines with a banshee shriek, masking voices and muffling movement. Visibility dropped. People trudged forward anyway, bundled in layers, armed with flashlights and hope. By Sunday night, after 2 full days with no sign, the sheriff's department escalated the search. Helicopters were dispatched with thermal sensors. Drones buzzed low over tree lines. Rangers from Black Pine National Forest were brought in. Law enforcement from neighboring countries joined forces. It had become a coordinated, multi-agency search, one of the largest in Oregon's history for a missing vehicle. Still, no trace. No van, no boys, no answers. Until Monday afternoon. Luke Harris and Jenna Morales, 2 seasoned Forest Service workers, were making their way along a barely maintained trail deep inside Black Pine National Forest. It was an area only visited once or twice each winter, mostly to assess trail safety and check snowpack levels. It wasn't on any direct route. It wasn't near any major roads. But that's where they spotted something strange. The faint indentations of tire tracks, recent ones, mostly obscured by snow, but just visible enough to follow. They exchanged a look that wasn't a place vehicles were supposed to be. They followed the trail for nearly half a mile before it ended in a narrow, tree-lined clearing. There, sitting awkwardly under a canopy of snow-dusted evergreens, was the van. Adrian's van. It looked out of place, out of time. It wasn't crashed or tipped over, just parked, slightly angled, like someone had pulled in quickly and never reversed out. The paint was dull, weather-worn. Snow blanketed the roof. The sliding door was ajar, creaking open slightly with the wind. The windshield wipers had frozen mid-sweep. The engine, Harris noted, was warm, not running, but recently so, as if it had only just been turned off. Inside, the van was eerily intact. Sweat-damp jerseys hung from seatbacks. Fast food wrappers littered the floor. Burgers, fries, spilled soda. One of the back benches had a blanket draped over it, creased, as if someone had been resting there moments earlier. Ezra's inhaler sat uncapped on the dashboard. A pair of worn basketball shoes lay just outside the open door, toes pointed outward into the snow. A single trail of footprints led away, then stopped. No blood, no signs of struggle, no signs of anything. More disturbingly, the van had been found more than 100 miles from Ash Grove, in the opposite direction of Millfield. There were no major roads that led here, no logic to this location. It wasn't a detour or a shortcut. It was a complete deviation into the wilderness. And the van wasn't empty from abandonment. It looked like the boys had been interrupted. Within hours, dozens of search teams descended on the forest. Dogs barked into the trees. Drones scanned overhead. Volunteers spread out on foot, calling names into the white. But the snow kept falling. Every new flake erased a clue. Every gust of wind buried a possibility. And still nothing. No bodies, no tracks, no signs of where 10 young men could have gone from a parked van in the middle of nowhere. The questions began to boil. Why would 10 boys go into the forest at all? Why stop in a place without shelter or signal? Why was the engine warm yet no one inside? Why only 1 pair of footprints and no return? And the question no one wanted to ask aloud: what had taken them? Because nothing else made sense. Not one of the Millfield Meteors was found at the scene. Not one of them had returned to the van. Not one of them had left a message, a call, or a sign. Only silence. Only snow. Only fear. At first, investigators leaned on the most logical explanation. The group had simply gotten lost. Disoriented in the dark, misled by unfamiliar roads, Maybe thrown off course by a snowstorm or poor visibility. It happened. Teenagers took wrong turns all the time, especially in rural Oregon, especially at night, especially with snow thick on the shoulders and signage, sometimes buried or missing altogether. And yet that theory began to unravel almost immediately. This wasn't a pair of hikers or an inexperienced couple relying on memory and paper maps. This was 10 young men in a van, friends who knew each other well. Half of them had played at Ash Grove more than once. Several had access to GPS apps, even older smartphones, still pinged towers for location data, and some had portable signal boosters they used during road games. Cody Tucker's dad had even installed a dashboard phone mount so they could navigate more safely. They weren't clueless kids. They were practical, resourceful, and seasoned in travel. This was a routine route, not some cross-country odyssey. Even more glaring, not one of them made a call, not a text, not a voicemail, not even a half-written draft saved on a phone. Zero outgoing communication from 10 people, some of whom were known to text obsessively. A few phones were recovered later, frozen, yes, but still functional. Full batteries. No signs of damage or water exposure, yet all eerily silent. And the van itself? Pristine. No dents. No mud caked on the undercarriage. No torn bumpers, broken lights, or cracked mirrors. No signs it had slid or hit anything. The tires had traction. The gas tank was nearly full. The engine turned over without a hiccup. It was as though someone had parked it carefully, turned off the ignition, opened the door, and vanished. This wasn't a crash. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't even a detour gone wrong. This was something else. The search effort was immediate and massive. In addition to local sheriff's deputies and town volunteers, federal park rangers were brought in due to the van's proximity to Black Pine National Forest. By day 2, high-tech support arrived: drones with thermal imaging, helicopters outfitted for night vision, snowmobiles for the deep trails. Ground teams were deployed in overlapping grids. Every cave, ravine, frozen creek, and game trail within 10 miles of the van was searched. Flyers blanketed Millfield and neighboring towns. They were mailed to rural residents, pinned to trees, tucked under windshields at church parking lots. The slogan became inescapable: "Missing, the Millfield 10." Local news stations covered it, then regional, then national. A 50-0 reward was announced by a local business coalition. Hotlines were opened. Online tip portals were launched. Leads came pouring in, hundreds in the first 48 hours. Sightings, rumors, dreams. Everyone had a theory. Everyone wanted to help. But most of it led nowhere. One man swore he saw a group walking along Route 7, but that was 60 miles from the van. A woman in a nearby town said she heard shouting in the woods behind her cabin at 3 a.m., but no tracks were found. Someone else reported 2 young hitchhikers near an old ranger station, but couldn't recall their faces. One tipster claimed to have found discarded team gear in a public restroom, turned out to be a completely unrelated school's jersey. Then came the surreal. A self-proclaimed psychic emailed investigators a detailed dream: a frozen lake, a sunken van, boys banging on the ice from below. Searchers scoured every frozen body of water in the region. Nothing. Paranormal forums erupted with theories of abduction, cult activity, mass psychosis, alien interference. Someone posted a blurry scan of a decades-old forestry map with a section marked Red Zone, and it went viral, despite authorities insisting it was a hoax. As hope faltered, the town began turning inward. Rumors turned sharp. Had there been a fight among the team? Had someone snapped? Some whispered that maybe one of the boys had suffered a mental breakdown, and the others followed blindly. Others feared the boys had encountered something or someone in the woods, something they ran from, something they didn't survive. Local folklore was dredged up. Stories of strange lights in the sky on the night they vanished, of hunters who'd reported weird animal calls in that same stretch of black pine years earlier. And one tale, resurfacing again and again, of a man, a hermit, Maybe a survivalist who once lived off-grid in the deeper parts of the forest, known for chasing hikers off his land. He was questioned hard, his records were combed, but he had a rock-solid alibi and had reportedly moved away 2 winters ago. Still, suspicions lingered. People began avoiding the woods entirely. Parents didn't let their kids walk home after school. Church sermons leaned heavily into language about darkness and unexplained evil. The local police set up a permanent station near the search base. Something was wrong. Everyone felt it. And then came the gas station report. A couple returning from a ski weekend contacted authorities after seeing the flyers. They described a sighting from the night of the disappearance, around midnight, at a roadside gas station in a town called White Elk, about 30 miles northeast of where the van was found. They said they saw a group of young men, 6 or 7, maybe more, ages roughly 16, 18, dressed thinly for the weather. One boy had no shoes. Another stood motionless in the candy aisle for several minutes, just staring at the shelves like he didn't know what they were. None of them made a purchase. One quietly knocked over a display rack and carefully put every item back, never saying a word. They weren't drunk, they didn't seem high, but something about them was deeply off. The clerk remembered one of the boys whispering something, barely audible. "He's still out there," or something similar. The exact words weren't clear, but the tone was unmistakable fear. When the couple saw the missing posters the next morning, they were certain it had been them. Authorities rushed to the gas station, but by the time they arrived, the group, if it had been the Meteors, was long gone. There were no fingerprints, no surveillance footage. The cameras had been down for routine maintenance that night. No receipts, no tire tracks, just an empty gas station and a set of matching stories from 2 shaken witnesses. The report was credible, specific, detailed, and it changed everything. Because White Elk was northeast of the van, not southwest, not toward Millfield. If the sighting was real, the boys had gone further into the wilderness, without the van, possibly on foot. Or worse, possibly with someone else. That single tip reframed the entire investigation. No longer a disappearance, possibly a pursuit. But if they had been on the run, why didn't they seek help? Why didn't they speak up? Why didn't even one of them cry out? And most chilling of all, if they were at the gas station, where did they go next? As the days passed, White Elk was searched from top to bottom. Forest roads, motels, storage units, cabins. A nearby ravine was dragged. The river was scanned by sonar. Nothing. No more sightings. No more answers. The tip became a specter proof they might have survived the van, but not for long. And as winter deepened, and the days continued to shorten, the investigation grew colder. Colder than the forest floor. Colder than the air above the van. Colder than the silence that now surrounded the Millfield 10. 17 weeks after the boys vanished, when most of the town had resigned itself to quiet mourning and search teams had thinned, the case took a harrowing and irreversible turn. It happened in late June, when the last patches of snow still clung stubbornly to the shaded hollows of the northern ridges. 2 seasoned hikers, Liam Cortez and Darren Wu, both well-versed in the challenges of the Oregon backcountry, had set out on a multi-day trek through Black Pine National Forest. They were familiar with the terrain and had plotted a loop designed to hit a few of the more obscure fire roads that had long since fallen off official maps. They wanted a challenge. They didn't expect history. On their 3rd day, while descending along a deer path near the cliffside ridge of Red Creek Hollow, their GPS briefly lost signal. A wrong turn sent them east rather than south, into terrain not listed on their digital map. The trail narrowed. Snow grew deeper again, unexpected for that elevation in June. That's when Liam spotted something through the dense spruce, a flash of man-made geometry amid the wild, crooked landscape. A structure. Just the tip of a roofline, camouflaged by thick branches and still accumulated snow. They paused, both immediately curious. Structures that deep in the woods were rare and rarely good news. As they pushed through a band of brush, the sight came fully into view. A shuttered ranger station, weather-beaten and sagging. It leaned slightly to one side, its roof pocked with holes, its siding gone gray with rot and time. There was no signage, no flag. It wasn't marked on any trail map. It was simply there, forgotten, hidden. The men approached cautiously. The porch steps moaned underfoot. Moss bloomed between the planks. Darren knocked on the door, half joking, but it barely held in the frame. They forced it open with a sharp shoulder check, and the sound of it giving way echoed unnaturally through the quiet woods. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of mildew and old wood. Dust motes danced in the fractured light, filtering through boarded windows. Shelves stocked with long-expired emergency rations lined the far wall. A rusted first aid kit sat untouched. Maps curled with age hung loose on rusted pins. The structure had once served as a backwoods emergency outpost, likely used in the 60s or 70s by fire lookouts or winter rescue teams, but it hadn't seen occupation in decades. And in the center of the cold, dark room on the splintered wooden floor lay the skeletal form of a young man. He was curled into a tight ball, wrapped in several wool blankets, as though trying to conserve heat that had long since left his body. His socks had frozen stiff to his feet. His skin, pale and shrunken, hugged tightly to the frame of his bones. His eyes were closed. His lips were cracked and blue. It was James Tucker, the quieter of the inseparable twins, identified by the faded initials inside his hoodie and, later, dental records. There were no signs of violence, no blood, no struggle, just a tragic stillness that spoke volumes. He had clearly died alone, slowly. Near his side, an extinguished candle stub, a stack of empty cans, mostly military surplus beans and stew, likely scavenged from the station itself. A scattered duffel bag lay open, its contents disturbed. Team jersey, socks, wrappers, and a spiral-bound notebook, pages nearly illegible from water damage. Some pages bore frantic scribbles. Others had drawings faces, court diagrams, the team logo. One page had just a sentence, crossed out over and over again. Not all of us made it. But the most chilling discovery sat on the old splintered table. Carved deep into the wood grain, with a knife or some other sharp edge, were the words, "Waited. No one came." Search teams were mobilized within hours. The discovery reignited the investigation with ferocity. Helicopters beat the air overhead again. Search dogs returned. Drones buzzed like hornets. This time, they knew what to look for. The sadness had never left Millfield, but now it was joined by a sickening urgency. And it didn't take long for more bodies to emerge from the woods. Roughly 400 yards away, beneath a collapsed pine bough, they found Cody Tucker, his twin. He lay on his side, hoodie pulled up over his face, one arm reaching toward a moss-covered log. His position was oddly peaceful, like he'd simply laid down and fallen asleep, but pine needles had already begun to settle over his body. The cold had preserved him eerily well. In his pocket was a broken iPod Mini. On his wrist, he still wore the woven friendship bracelet that James had made the team during the previous season. A quarter-mile further, near a shallow, frozen creek, they found Brian Chen. His coat had been turned inside out, likely a sign of late-stage hypothermia, a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing. One glove was missing. In the other, his fingers were wrapped tightly around what turned out to be a napkin and part of a protein bar wrapper. His boots were nearby, untied. He had apparently stumbled down the slope before collapsing. And then, about 600 yards east, near the base of a log marked with claw scratches and ice rot, they found Theo Mason upright, seated, arms wrapped around his knees. His head was bowed forward, chin touching chest. He still wore his watch, the time frozen at 4:17 a.m. Whether that was the moment he passed or the moment the cold stopped his heart, no one could say. His final pose suggested waiting, hoping. All four boys showed no signs of violence, just exposure, starvation, and the final, quiet surrender that hypothermia brings, the slow shutting down of the body, the hallucinations, the numbness, the drowsy disorientation Some may have even believed help was minutes away. They had no tents, no fire, barely enough food. Their final hours were cold, confused, and completely alone. But the most disturbing detail wasn't how they died. It was where. The shelter and bodies were nearly 9 miles from the van's last known location. The terrain between was rugged, steep, and blanketed in deep snow during the time of their disappearance. No road connected them. No clear trail. It would have taken at least 2 days to cross that landscape longer without winter gear. Yet none of the boys had hiking packs. No snowshoes. No proper layers. So how had they made it? Why had they left the van? And why had earlier searches missed the shelter entirely, despite supposedly canvassing the area? And the heaviest question of all, why were there only 4? Because 6 boys were still unaccounted for. Marcus Reynolds, the captain, the mentor, the heart of the team, gone. Gary Delgado, the forward known for his responsibility and resourcefulness. His phone, when checked weeks earlier, had shown a signal briefly pinged a tower close to where the shelter would later be found. Then silence. And the others? Ezra Klein, the team's brain. His notebook had not been found. Darnell Green, the jokester, the glue, missing. Trevor Martinez, the team's shadow, always helping, always watching, not a trace. Their names now hovered in the air like open wounds carved into every prayer vigil, whispered over every family dinner table. The community could process grief, even tragedy, but not this emptiness. Search efforts resumed with renewed desperation. The forest was remapped. Volunteers combed every ravine, every rock outcrop. But the only things found were memories. A sock, a snapped headphone wire, a candy wrapper with a number scrawled on it 1120, possibly a timer date. And then the leads dried up again. What had happened between the van and the shelter? Had the group split up intentionally? Had someone led them there? Or were they fleeing something? Theories ran wild. A predator, a breakdown, a pact. But the facts were few, and the clock was no longer ticking. It had stopped somewhere in the trees. The case no longer felt like a disappearance. It felt like a haunting, a puzzle with missing pieces and no border. And in the minds of those left behind, one unbearable idea remained. Whatever took those boys into the forest that night wasn't done yet. It had followed them through snow, through fear, through the final shivers of life. And it was still out there, waiting, watching, just beyond the tree line. The condition of the bodies only deepened the mystery, turning every answer into a darker riddle. Inside that abandoned ranger station where James Tucker was discovered, the scene bordered on the surreal. Shelves sagged beneath row upon row of untouched provisions, canned beans, corned beef hash, MRE pouches, stamped U.S. Forest Service 1992. A 5-gallon propane tank, still full, sat beside a compact 2-burner camp stove. The stove's chrome surfaces were dust-dulled but intact, its rubber fuel hose pliable, free of cracks. A waterproof Pelican case held 3 matchbooks, a ferrocerium rod, and an emergency flare all bone dry. Nearby, a wall-mounted tool rack contained 2 hatchets and a folding saw, blades unnicked, edges oiled. A small closet yielded brand-new winter parkas, insulated boots, and wool blankets still creased from factory packing, tags dangling from drawstrings like forgotten price stickers. Investigators cataloged each item with clinical precision and recoiled. Everything a stranded group would need to survive a black pine winter sat within arm's reach, yet none of it bore fingerprints or signs of use. The propane cylinder weighed exactly what it did when shipped. The stove's burners were speckless. The matchbooks, when opened, showed all 20 match heads unstruck. Not a single parka was missing from its plastic sleeve. No soot marked the rafters. No empty can lay bent in a camp stove mess. No one had even tried. Why? Forensic pathologists combing the scene proposed the simplest possibilities first. Perhaps the boys arrived too weak to act. Perhaps delirium from hypothermia rendered them irrational. Perhaps injuries prevented movement. Cody Tucker's X-rays indeed revealed a comminuted fracture of the right distal tibia, likely a broken ankle from a fall. Yet even that didn't explain the paralysis of the entire group. Investigators found no drag marks, no makeshift crutches, no rope harness indicating an effort to support an injured teammate. The snow immediately beyond the station retained only soft, wind-sculpted dunes, no prints, no trails. Equally confounding was the hand-crank emergency radio bolted beside a dusty window. Technicians confirmed its receiver broadcast clearly to dispatchers in Millfield, Ash Grove, and 2 county SAW repeaters. The charging dynamo turned smoothly. Its condenser mic picked up even whispered speech. Someone had penciled Testoki 11-3 on a strip of tape above the dial, evidence of a maintenance check just months before the boys vanished. Yet the logbooks at dispatch centers showed 0 inbound signals from that frequency during the critical nights. Why hadn't a desperate 17-year-old spun the crank, keyed the mic, and called for help? A medical and psychological maze. Dr. Marlene Ochoa, chief forensic pathologist for Benton County, completed preliminary autopsies within 48 hours. She found no blunt trauma, no defensive wounds, no toxins. Blood panels were negative for alcohol, opiates, and carbon monoxide. The causes of death were uniform: hypothermia, compounded by dehydration and caloric deficit. But Ochoa also noted something subtler: trace cortisol patterns consistent with extreme, prolonged stress. They didn't just freeze, she told reporters off record. They froze, terrified. That conclusion fueled a second wave of specialists. Cognitive psychologists argued that group hypothermia can warp decision-making, creating behavioral contagion where panic begets paralysis. They referenced case studies of mountaineers dying feet from stocked caches because cognition had collapsed. Others pointed to the concept of leader clinging, when a trusted figure disappears. Perhaps Marcus, morale implodes, and survivors default to fatal passivity. Yet counter-arguments piled up. Why had none of them, in a lucid moment, lit a single match? Why not tear into a parka, or stack blankets, or drag Cody indoors? Even advanced hypothermia ebbs and flows. Victims experience lucid intervals. 10 boys, dozens of intervals. Not one attempt? Rumors, legends, and an expanding shadow. Millfield's grief began mutating into folklore. At McCready's Diner, old-timers spoke of the Lantern Men, ghostly silhouettes rumored to patrol Black Pine since logging days. Younger residents swapped Reddit threads about a supposed Cold War listening post buried beneath the ridgeline, complete with sealed corridors and radiation warnings. Hunters claimed motion sensor cameras captured orbs of light flitting between trees, only to self-erase their SD cards. A retired sheriff's deputy insisted Black Pine once served as a clandestine prisoner transport corridor. He remembered seeing motorcades with armed guards vanish up logging spur roads under cover of night in the 80s. Even mundane anecdotes warped. A UPS driver recalled seeing flat black Humvees near the forest weeks before the disappearance, but dismissed them as National Guard exercises until hindsight made every detail ominous. Authorities kept public comment measured. But behind closed doors, FBI liaison Dana Halbrook raised alarms. Satellite imagery of the area around the van bore unexplained infrared flares, hotspots, that appeared for 45 seconds at 2:13 a.m., the night the boys vanished, then winked out. Analysts debated: emergency fires? Vehicle exhaust signatures? Something else? Amid this tension, the strangest clue of all emerged beneath a warped floorboard in the ranger station. Field techs, checking for rodent tunnels, pried up a loose 2.6 and uncovered a Ziploc bag containing a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice, edges water-stained but legible. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We tried to go back. We really did. But someone was watching. The back of the sheet proved even more chilling than a photocopied Millfield Meteors substitution roster. Beside each player's name, scribbles in frantic ballpoint. Ezra Klein struck through with a bold X. Darnell Green circled with blue ink. Marcus Reynolds circled twice, the second loop cutting so deep it tore the paper. Trevor Martinez, double question marks. The time or date field, if it had existed, was obliterated by water damage. FBI handwriting analyst Quinton Hale compared the script to yearbook inscriptions, homework, and notes seized from lockers. Result: inconclusive. The nearest match belonged to Trevor, but deviations in stroke pressure hinted at either severe cold-induced tremors or a different hand altogether. Hale refused to rule out foreign authorship. Equally baffling, the note had been hidden, not displayed, wedged so thoroughly under the plank it required a crowbar to retrieve. Whoever left it didn't expect or want quick discovery. Was it a time capsule for future rescuers? A confession? A warning meant only for those who found the bodies? Agents dusted the bag for prints. None. They tested the ink. Bic blue, standard. Age estimate, impossible. The cold could preserve ink for months without fading. If one of the missing boys wrote the message, why not broadcast the same warning on the radio stuck to the wall above him? Why not scrawl it across the door? Why cross out Ezra's name but double circle Marcus's? Did the circles mark the dead, the living, the guilty? Speculation split into camps. Marcus and one or two others left to find help, instructing the rest to stay put. Panic, injury, and hallucination dismantled the group that remained. But this didn't explain untouched supplies. The boys believed someone or something hunted them. Supplies remained unused because gathering, lighting a stove, or transmitting over radio might reveal their position. The carved table message waited. No one came becomes a bitter epitaph for a rescue that couldn't risk revealing itself. A trusted individual, perhaps a teammate, became violent or unstable, coercing the others to leave the van and later sabotaging survival efforts. But forensic exams found no defensive wounds and no fingerprints other than the boys on scene. The team met armed outsiders, militants, cultists, paramilitary unit. 4 escaped, stumbled on the station, but were too traumatized or fearful of recapture to signal for help. This aligned with the whispered, someone was watching, but offered no motive. Locals added a 5th, darker tale. Black Pine chooses. The forest, they said, collects tragedies: miners lost in 1912, hikers in 1955, a family in 1987. Some spoke of magnetic anomalies interfering with compasses and minds alike. Park archives listed 8 unsolved disappearances within a 10-mile radius since 1940, more than any other zone its size in Oregon. Weeks passed. Search grids expanded. Dive teams probed sinkholes. Botanists sequenced lichen on snapped branches to gauge disturbance dates. Nothing. Meanwhile, candlelight vigils in Millfield evolved into guarded stares at the tree line. Parents, triple-locked doors. Hunters ventured out only in pairs. Stories spread of hikers hearing radio static in the pines, voices repeating jersey numbers, then cutting out. Campers swore they glimpsed figures in Letterman jackets at dusk, only for prints to vanish by dawn. Investigators found no footprints, no campsites, no discarded wrappers newer than the boys. Yet each unexplained rustle, each stray glint in the underbrush, rekindled a single unbearable thought. Could the one who wrote that note still be alive, or still watching us watch the woods? A new command trailer parked at the forest edge. Motion-triggered trail cams sprouted like mushrooms along access roads. Still, the feed showed only wind-whipped branches and snow-laden silence. And the ranger station, now sealed with police tape, remained a monument to unanswered questions: untouched food, unlit stove, unused radio, and a hidden note whose every ragged word whispered that someone's eyes never left those boys and may never leave these woods. In the 2 decades since the disappearance of the Millfield Meteors, time has softened none of the grief. If anything, the absence has grown heavier, more intricate, like ivy crawling over old stone. What began as tragedy has become legacy, loss turned into a myth, and still no less real. The families have done everything possible to keep the boys' memories alive, refusing to let the silence define the story. Every February 19th, the town of Millfield gathers no matter the weather, no matter how many years have passed. Candlelit vigils are held at the Millfield Community Center, and more recently, at the high school gym, the symbolic heart of the town where those boys once soared across polished hardwood floors. A flame is lit for each missing or lost teammate. 10 names are spoken slowly, clearly, reverently, pausing between each, as if the town is holding its collective breath. And every year, the silence between names seems to stretch longer, heavier, like a moment of mourning that time refuses to dilute. Poems are read, some penned by classmates, others by strangers moved by the story. Choirs sing elegies. Parents tell old stories, funny ones, mostly like the time Cody and James pulled a prank on a substitute teacher, or when Darnell dressed up as the school mascot and tripped over the cheerleader's bench. There's laughter, there's sobbing, and above all, there's remembrance. Parents have written memoirs, contributed to anthologies, spoken at schools and conferences. They've told their stories on podcasts and appeared on local radio. A few turned their grief into activism, advocating for search and rescue funding, mental health awareness, and missing persons reform. On the 15th anniversary, Trevor Martinez's father walked the entire 60-mile route from Millfield to Ash Grove, carrying a framed photo of his son strapped to his chest. He stopped every 10 miles to speak aloud each of the boys' names, as if the wind itself might carry them home. Local newspapers run remembrance columns every February. Childhood photos are reprinted, some grainy, some sun-faded, but all filled with life. Smiles frozen in time, team snapshots, locker room candids, quotes from classmates who still speak of the boys as if they might walk through the doors at any moment. "We still keep their desks clean," one retired teacher said, "even after 20 years. Over time, the Meteors Memorial Fund was established, seeded by local donations and expanded through national grants. It provides scholarships for underprivileged youth across Oregon, focusing on sports programs, especially basketball, for kids who might not otherwise get the chance. Several of the boys' former coaches and teachers helped launch the initiative, believing that the best way to honor their legacy was to give other young people a shot at hope, at belonging, at team. Each year, the town hosts the Millfield Memorial Charity Game. Alumni return, wearing jerseys embroidered with the missing boys' names on their backs. Players line up and touch the mural wall before tip-off. The scoreboard begins at 24, and the crowd stands in silence until it counts down to 20-0. All proceeds go toward youth development, grief counseling, and search and rescue nonprofits. It's not just a game, it's a ritual. Despite closure never arriving, the pursuit of answers has never ceased. Over the years, private investigators have come and gone, some hired by families, others volunteering out of obsession. One former FBI profiler spent 2 years poring over reports, drone footage, and witness statements before walking away, visibly haunted. "This case," he said, "is the most inexplicable disappearance of my career. I've seen bodies dumped in caves and culverts. This feels wrong." Another independent analyst, a former military contractor, floated a chilling theory. The boys may have accidentally stumbled into a poaching ring or clandestine hunting camp, operating illegally in the forest, and were silenced to prevent exposure. No evidence has ever substantiated that claim, but it planted seeds of paranoia that still fester in whispers. In 2016, a regional documentary titled Frozen Silence, The Millfield Mystery, aired on Oregon Public Broadcast. What began as a low-budget retrospective exploded in popularity once it hit streaming platforms. Within weeks, Reddit lit up with theories, timelines, annotated maps, and grainy YouTube recreations. Theories multiplied like spores. Government cover-up, missing 411 connections, psychological experiments, deep woods, infrasound, portal phenomena. A fringe theory involving mind control radio waves from a decommissioned Air Force base got thousands of upvotes despite zero scientific support. Podcasters flocked to Black Pine, staging live investigations, hiking to the ranger station ruins, wielding EMF detectors and spirit boxes. One group camped for 5 nights near the original van site and claimed to hear a low-frequency hum in the dead of night. They recorded no audio, but that didn't stop their episode from hitting 1 million views. One particularly viral thread mapped 6 other unexplained disappearances across the Pacific Northwest, all involving groups, all athletes or outdoor specialists, all occurring near old ranger outposts or logging roads. A pattern? A coincidence? Or simply the human brain trying to impose structure on chaos? To some, the Millfield case remains an anomaly, a storm of bad luck, isolation, and fatal decisions layered atop one another. To others, it's a message, a riddle, a warning. And still, the core questions remain, uttered like a prayer each year. Why? Why did 10 bonded, capable young men leave a warm van stocked with food, phones, and gear? Why did they plunge into one of Oregon's most treacherous forests with no plan, no signal, no apparent reason? Why did they walk past survival supplies, past functioning radios, past hope? What did they fear? What did they see? Even now, 2 boys remain completely unaccounted for. Marcus Reynolds, team captain, motivator, the glue. Adrian Lee, introspective, loyal, a musician who once wrote a song for every teammate. No remains, no clothing, no digital traces, no sightings, as if the forest swallowed them whole. Some believe they were the last to flee, others believe they may have been the first to go missing, which shattered the group's resolve. There are even those who cling to the slim hope they survived, were taken in, and chose never to return. But that hope grows quieter with every passing year. Their jerseys, 4 and 7, have been retired from Millfield High permanently. No player has worn them since. A mural now stretches along the north wall of the gym, 10 shooting stars across a midnight blue sky, each etched with a name. Beneath them, in gold block letters, a phrase the town holds close: we remember, we wonder, we hope. Over time, the story of the Millfield Meteors has transcended tragedy and become something else entirely, a modern folktale, a collective scar carried by a community unwilling to forget. Hikers leave offerings at the trailheads: basketballs, team pins, energy bars, sometimes old game shoes with scrawled initials on the soles. Campers report hearing voices in the woods at night, faint and youthful, calling names into the dark. One park ranger said he once found 5 footprints in fresh snow circling a fire pit. No boot prints, no approach trail, no exit, just 5 barefoot human impressions, no explanation. More than one camper has claimed to see a group of shadowy figures moving in the tree line, always just out of reach, always vanishing the moment a flashlight is raised. Some locals won't go near Black Pine after sunset. Others walk the perimeter trails each February 19th, flashlights in hand, phones out just in case. They call it the Vigil Walk. No one has found anything, but everyone keeps looking. Because when 10 young men disappear into the cold, and the world moves on, someone must keep the flame alive. The mountain remains silent. The forest remains indifferent. But the town remembers, and they wonder, and they hope. Every year, every name, every time the wind moves through the trees. Together, we remember. Together, we search. And maybe, one day, together, we'll find the truth. What really happened to the Millfield Meteors? 10 friends, a single game, and a wrong turn that became an open-ended nightmare. Was it a tragic accident, born from panic and disorientation? Or was there something darker lurking in the shadows of Black Pine National Forest? A presence, a force, a decision so devastating it could unravel the bonds of brotherhood. Why did 10 young men, athletes, best friends, teammates, veer over 100 miles off their return route? Why did they abandon a fully functioning van, leave behind food and supplies, and walk into the wilderness with no map, no gear, and seemingly no fear? What drove them forward, or who? The van, the supplies, the untouched shelter, they weren't just abandoned. They were left in such a state of confusion and disorder. It was as if something interrupted the group mid-decision. A force, perhaps internal or external. The candle, the one boot, the broken inhaler, the messages carved into wood, clues scattered like breadcrumbs, but none of them forming a full trail. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We tried to go back. We really did. But someone was watching. Those words remain etched into the public consciousness like frost on glass, chilling, cryptic, and unsolved. They represent fear, confession, maybe even guilt. But whose voice do they echo? And what were they trying to tell us? To this day, Marcus and Adrian remain missing. Could they have survived? Could they have made it out, wandering under assumed identities, hiding in fear, or worse, taken by something we can't yet understand? Could their absence mean more than just loss? Could it hold the final key to this mystery? Over the years, the questions have only grown louder. Was there an outside threat? Was there betrayal within the group? Were they running from something human or something far stranger? Was it a descent into madness? A group panic that snowballed into tragedy? Or did they encounter something otherworldly? Was this a tragedy caused by nature, by man, or by something we don't even have a name for? If this story chilled you the way it did us, we ask one thing. Keep it alive. Drop your theories in the comments. What do you think happened that night? Was it a tragic miscalculation, a brush with the unknown, or something that defies explanation entirely? Share this video. Let more people hear the Meteor story. Because awareness doesn't just honor the lost, it fuels the search for truth. And most importantly, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications. We've got more stories like this. Unsolved, unexplained, unforgettable. Because sometimes the scariest mysteries aren't about what you see. They're about what's missing. The Millfield Meteors are gone, but their story is still here.